In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create a custom design for a t-shirt to use on Teespring. Now you might think, well, why would I do that since Teespring offers plenty of their own art and I can add text and all of that? Well, the big problem that you can encounter with Teespring from using their resources is that it's their resources. In other words, if you create a cool design, you can use their graphics, you can use their type design and all of that. And of course, you can sell your t-shirts and make money from those. However, if you want to use the art for anything else other than the t-shirt that you designed through Teespring, you cannot do it. So if you have a custom logo or a special design that you want to work with or anything like that, you're kind of up a creek. You're stuck. The other issue that really plays into this is that while you can enter text and artwork, you're extremely limited in what's available to you and how you can work with the text. And with the design and text tools that we have available to us in Photoshop, we have a lot more flexibility. Not to mention the fact that rather than be limited to the few font choices that you have on Teespring, you're only limited by however many fonts you have installed on your computer that you can work with. Now, there are some specific design points that you need to keep in mind when you're designing for Teespring, and we're going to go through these as we prepare a couple case studies just so that you can see the process and how to get the best possible price and those kinds of things, because depending on how you handle your design, that will determine cost, okay, your base cost. Now, before we dig into working with Photoshop here, there's another point that I want to make, and that is that unlike services like CafePress or Zazzle, you cannot use full color photographs for your Teespring designs. And the primary reason is because unlike CafePress and Zazzle, Teespring does not use transfers to print your t-shirts. They actually use real screen printing, just like you would with any other t-shirt manufacturer, and that means that they're limited to a maximum of 10 colors. So whenever you're creating a design, you have to keep that in mind, because if you have more than 10 colors or you try to use full color, Teespring will flag your design and you won't even be able to move forward. It'll just say, apparently you're trying to upload a full color image and that doesn't work. So just a couple things to keep in mind. Also, another thing that I want to point out here is that this is your printable area. I'm on Teespring right now, and this is the printable area that you have. And you'll notice if you click Add Upload Artwork and you choose Upload Your Own, they recommend either high resolution or vector art. Max size of 5 megabytes, which isn't a big deal. File types of JPEG, PNG, and EPS. And PNG is kind of a big one, because if you want to create any kind of transparency at all, you would want to save it as a PNG file. We'll look into that. And then maximum dimensions is 3000 pixels, and that's width. Now, here's how that translates. This area, this space here, essentially corresponds to a printable area of 12 by 18 inches. They don't tell you that, but that's actually what it works out to. So you want to keep that in mind whenever you're establishing your initial document in Photoshop. Now, it's not to say that you have to use all that space, and this is the printable area for this type of t-shirt. If you switch to other apparel types that's available on Teespring, the printable area may be different for you. So you want to keep that in mind. But for our basic t-shirt, which is what we're looking at today, you have an area of 12 by 18. So I thought we would create a case study. Actually, we're going to do two. We're going to do a very simple one first and then get into something a little bit more complex, keeping in mind that we're limited to our colors. Okay, so I'm going to switch over here to Photoshop, and you'll notice that I have this silly looking robot loaded up here, and this is at 100%, so it's a very low resolution image. And this is an image of a robot that I found from an old expired patent, which means that it's in the public domain and we can use it for however we see fit, including making a t-shirt on Teespring. Now, one of the first things that I'm going to recommend that you do is create a new document, just file new, and we're going to set the width at 3000 and the height at 4500, and I'm going to set the resolution for 250. And what that should give us is an approximate size, if we switch this over to inches, of 12 by 18. Okay, so we're right at our target range. So you'll want to remember that 3000 pixels by 4500 pixels at 250 pixels per inch gives us a nice high resolution file that'll work really well with screen printing, and it gives us our 12 by 18 dimensions that we need. So the theme of this t-shirt that we're going to work with is Robots Love Beer. Okay, that's the text that we're going to go with, and we're going to use our little robot guy as the center of attention. So now remember, I said that we don't have to fill all the space. That's fine, but this is the space that we have to work with, and so we'll play within this space. And I haven't pre-designed this t-shirt, by the way, so I don't know where it's going to end up. I have no idea. But first things first, I'm just going to type in some basic type, and we'll just type in Robots Love Beer. Okay, and I actually have a font loaded, one that I use quite a bit actually. It's called Bank Gothic, and let's make it a lot bigger, say 120. And we don't need a lot of space there between it. Actually, we may not even need any space, just to kind of, let's try maybe 150. Yeah, that'll work. And let's add additional space between the letters, say maybe 180. And you know, it's interesting. I realize that there's black behind the white type here just because the letters are highlighted because we're editing them right now. But it actually kind of looks cool, doesn't it? To have the black behind the white. Maybe we'll do that. We'll just kind of play it by ear. But for now, we'll go with just the black type, and we'll reserve the right to change later. Now, you'll notice that Love and Beer are about the same width, but Robots is a lot wider. So I'm going to increase this size here to see if we can get somewhere close to the width of Robots, so that all the type is about the same width. And I think we're pretty close. Yeah, and let's see, Beer is still a little wider, so I'm going to try it down to 40. Okay, so now it's very block-like, and the reason why I thought it might be cool to do that is just because normally Robots are kind of tin can-like and all of that. So we're gonna just park this type down here for now. We'll revisit it here in a little bit. The next thing we're gonna do is bring our robot guy over, and I'm just gonna drag it and drop it into our area, and you'll notice, holy cow, that he's kind of small, right? But that's okay. I actually planned that on purpose because I want to use the opportunity to show you how you can actually use low resolution images and do some pretty cool tricks in Photoshop to make them usable. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is scale this bad boy up, and so we'll hit Edit, Transform, Scale, and we're just gonna maybe make him about that size. So we're blowing him up over 700%, which if I zoom in here, you can see it's not very good, is it? It's very, very blurry. But that's okay. That's quite all right, because we're going to fix him right up. Now, we have a couple options that I want to show you. I'm going to make a copy of this guy, and Photoshop gives us the ability to do some really cool things with line drawings like this. One of those is to use oil paint, and because it's all lines, oil paint does some pretty cool things with it. And you'll notice that the first thing that it does, if we look at the illustration here, it smooths everything out. So if I apply the filter, for instance, here's that that gray area that I talked about that we want to remove. So I'm going to hit Control L for levels, select the highlight eyedropper, and just click so that we can get rid of the area there. But you'll notice that if we compare the before and after, see how just that simple change made all the difference in the world. It smoothed it out and all of that. So you might be thinking though, yeah, but we have all of these gray tones and we have to be careful of, you know, the 10 colors includes shades of gray. Okay, you want to keep that in mind. So I want to show you another trick, and it's still kind of blurry, right? I mean, we're only at 33%, but you can see where it's kind of blurry. So the next thing that we're going to do to kind of sharpen our image, if you will, is come up to Image, Adjustments, and Threshold. And you'll notice what happened like right away. The image just sharpens right up. And now, let me just zoom out, we can just use the slider to control the threshold to determine what shows up on the robot and what doesn't. And you can actually do multiple versions of the robot. So like if you want more of his mouth to show up, just create multiple versions of this and then copy and paste, you know, the different versions that you want to end up with the complete guy. But for this case study, I'm just going to go with something maybe about like that. Okay. And so now if you zoom in, you'll see right there is at 100%. You'll see he's very sharp, which is awesome, especially whenever you compare it to where we started. Huge difference, isn't there? So now it's really taking on the form of some nice clip art, and it's only black and white because we use threshold. That reduced all the gray scale toning to black and white, which is perfect. That's exactly what we need. The next thing that we're going to do is we want to get rid of any of the white area that's around the robot. But before we do that, we're going to I'm going to choose the paintbrush tool and switch to black. And you'll notice how there's some little gaps here and there, and we want to fill those in just so that whenever we use the magic wand to select around him, it doesn't select inside his arms or anything like that. So I'm just going to fill in these little break areas, and you know, you don't have to be, this isn't rocket science and it doesn't have to be perfect or anything like that. So you don't need to spend a lot of time, you know, doing something like this. Just close that gap there, and I'm going to extend that over like so. And we'll do the same thing here. And let's see if we have any others. Here's one on his thumb. Now, I don't know about you, but I like robots. I think it's because I've always seen robots as like part of man's exploration of himself, you know, and I find that fascinating. All right, let's see, we can connect it here and here, put a little connector line there. All right, so I think we're pretty good. And if there's any other marks that we don't like this mark here on his head, we can just erase that quick. Not quite sure what's going on here, so maybe we'll just separate that a little bit. Get rid of these little guys, we don't need them. And oh, you know what? I missed here. Okay, perfect. So the next thing we want to do, I'm going to zoom out here. Next thing we want to do is take the magic wand, and we're just going to click. And let's see. Actually, you know what? It looks like I still missed someplace. Oh yeah, I did right there. Okay, so let's close this gap. Alright. Now we'll take our magic wand, and I'm just clicking in the white area. Now we're not selecting any of the robot guys, so that's good. So I'm selecting the white area. The tolerance is set to 32, which is the default, and that should be fine. But I just want to hit delete. And the reason why is because ultimately I want him to be transparent. Okay. Alright, so our t-shirt design is coming together very nicely, and I don't know if I'm going to do the black background or not. I think for right now I'm just going to go with a two-color kind of thing. I'm going to highlight the word love and make it red. My favorite red is CC0000. And I'm going to take this same red and go up to our robot guy. And let's see, we'll choose the paint bucket. Actually, let's sample the red here first, and then choose the paint bucket. And with our robot guy here, I'm just going to click on that little medallion thing on his chest. Boom. Okay. And so let's say that we want to just go with a basic design like this. So here's what we want to do. Remember I mentioned about how we can upload PNG files, and there's a lot of advantages to that, especially if we don't want this to just be a big white rectangle on a t-shirt. Especially, I mean, if it's a white t-shirt, it's one thing, but if it's not a white t-shirt and we go to a color, we want to have the robot at least silhouetted out. And so the first thing we're going to do is turn off the background. And so you can see our text and our robot guy are all by themselves. And in order to maintain that transparency, what we want to do, let me move the layers up here a little bit. We want to select all of our layers, even the ones that are turned off right now. And we're going to right mouse click, and we're going to choose merge layers. And so now you notice that all the layers are together in one, and we've maintained the transparency here. So I'm going to choose File, Save As, and we want to select PNG, and we're going to call this Robot 1, and save it to the desktop. Go with the default settings, and then switch back over here to Teespring, and we're going to click here to upload, and we want to find our robot. Here it is. Alright, now you'll notice that even though we designed it at 12 by 18, it comes in small, and that's just the way this program does things. So actually, let's keep it centered and just drag it and scale it. Now, if you go beyond their bounding box, it turns red. That's just to let you know that you're outside of the printable area. If I come back in the printable area, you notice that the red goes away. You'll also notice that the cost of the t-shirts increased, okay, to $9.15 because it's a two-color image. And it read it correctly. Actually, technically, it's a three-color image because white is a color. So white, black, and red. But $9.15 actually isn't bad for an image like that. But because we added transparency to the surrounding areas except for the robot itself, you can see that it really doesn't matter what color we select. The robot shows up great, and I think this gold actually looks kind of cool. Yeah, that's actually kind of a cool t-shirt. And so there you have it. That's just a real quick down and dirty basic design. And it's something, you could get something similar, but they don't have a font that looks like that, and none of the robots look like that, where you can do customized coloring or anything like that. So that's one big advantage to creating artwork. So let's take this one step further. I love working with, let me just, before we get into the next case study here, I'm going to save a copy of the robot just so that I have it, and we'll close that. So some of you may be aware of the fact that I love public domain images, and well, I love the public domain in general, and I'm going to show you how we can create something really cool using photograph. In this case, it's a photograph of Native Americans, and this is part of the Edward Curtis collection. So the first thing, and this is, by the way, a low resolution image. So the first thing we're going to do is actually crop this down so that we just have the picture. Okay, so I'm just going to crop it in here, crop it in here. Like so. And I also want to expand the image a little bit. Let's do some scaling, actually. First thing I'm going to do is choose image size, and I'm going to set the resolution to 250 like we did before, and then the width to 3000 pixels. Okay, and we'll click OK. And so now our image has been resized, and it's kind of blurry. I mean, this is at 100%, so you can see that it's kind of blurry, but that's okay. And the next thing we're going to do is actually increase the canvas size so we have more space in the sky. So I want the ground is going to be the ground, so we're going to keep the ground where it is. So I'm going to choose this anchor point in the center middle, and let's change the height to maybe, well, you know what, for now, let's just change it to 3000 also. So we're going to make a square image. And actually, I noticed that it just filled to black, so we don't want that to happen. So let's change it to 3000. You want to pay attention to this when you're extending your canvas, is you can actually choose foreground or background, black, white, gray, or another color. So I want white. So there we are. That's a little bit better. Now, the next thing that I want to do is just kind of play with the contrast a little, because the sky we aren't going to really need, but I want the Indians and the horses and all of that we're going to be using. And you'll see where I'm going with this in just a little bit. So let's bring up levels, Control L. And I'm going to use the eyedropper and click in the sky, which will help remove a lot of the sky. You'll notice that it's also removing some of our guy over here, so we don't want to get too crazy with it. And then I'm going to use the mid-tone and the, well, actually we're not going to use the shadow at all. I'm going to use the mid-tone just to darken up the native guys here a little bit. Something like that. So let's work with this for now. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to make a copy. And remember how with a robot we went to threshold? We're going to do the same thing here. We want image, adjustments, threshold. And you'll notice that we have control over how these guys show up. And so now it's just a matter of moving the slider to what I would prefer, you know, for the image to look like. How much detail in their face and those kinds of things. So I think I'm going to go with something like that. They don't need to be recognizable or anything like that, we're just going for a basic look. Okay, now you'll notice that we lost some detail here in some of the acoustics that they were holding. So I'm going to add some of that back in real quick. And to do that, I'm going to use the path tool for creating lines. And I'm going to select black as a color. And I want, the weight of 4 is probably fine. And I'm just going to draw these lines back in. And you'll notice that every time I draw a new line, it actually just creates a new layer. And that one's pretty solid. We'll just fill it in a little bit more. Oh well, I'm going to leave that one, that one alone. And so we have our lines drawn in, and so I'm going to combine them with our new background. So I'll just choose merge layers. And then I'm going to pick a small brush. 8 pixels should be fine. And I'm going to zoom in. And kind of like what we did previously, I'm going to fill in some gaps. And I'm going to paint in or out some other details, like we don't need this here. And we'll just kind of clean this up a little bit. I'm not so much interested in whether or not it's perfect as far as, their faces being enclosed in every area or anything like that. That's not the look that I'm going for. I want this to be kind of rustic. But I may paint in the horse here just a little bit. And maybe we'll go with a slightly smaller brush. So I'm just going to something like that. And we'll draw connector lines here for these feathers. And the horse's legs kind of didn't do so good in the conversion, so I'm going to fill in those just a little bit. Again, this is completely subjective. It really, there's no rhyme or reason. And, if you end up working with similar art or using the same method, which I would really encourage you to experiment with, there isn't a right or wrong way of doing this, okay? This is just a matter of personal preference. And excuse me. And let's get rid of some of these extra dot details in here. We don't need those. Oops. Got a little carried away there. Delete those out. And the last thing we're going to do is paint in this area. I want it to be solid black. So I'm going to go to a larger brush to save time. How's that for saving time? Okay, now the next thing that we want to do here is I want to silhouette these guys out. And what that means is I need to remove the white background. And I'm going to make a copy of this just so we can tuck those away. And to select the white in this case, I want all the white selected. Okay, so I'm going to use select color range and just eyedropper the white, make sure the fuzziness is set all the way to the right, and hit OK. And then everything that's selected, I'm going to delete so that my Indian guys are 100% transparent. That's what I want. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse click and choose blending options, and we're going to put a white stroke around everything. So I'm going to choose white. And maybe it's kind of hard to see against the transparency, but we can adjust it later. Perhaps something like that for now. 8 pixels. And just to kind of see what we're doing, I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to fill it with the color. Now, I have an end result in mind, and the color blue has nothing to do with it, which is why I'm going to pick it, and you'll see the benefit of that later on. One more thing I should probably point out here is that the original photograph that I was working with was in grayscale, so we need to change the mode from grayscale to RGB. So we'll do that now. We don't want to merge. And so now the blue shows up. So I'm going to hit Edit, Fill, and fill layer 1 there with blue. So now you can see the end result of our little experiment here. And that gives us the ability to fill in some blanks that we ultimately need to fill in. And you can see like this little dot here. We can go in and erase that because we don't need that. So I'm going to select my layer here and just delete that or erase that. And the other thing that I'm going to do is create a secondary layer of white, where we're going to use the polygonal lasso tool, and the areas that should be at least solid white, like where the guys are and the horses are, I'm just going to click around, and I'm going to want to make sure that everything is selected. You notice that I'm not being very particular, and that's fine, because all we're going to do is all of these areas that represents a person or an animal, we want to make sure that it's solid white where they are, not between their legs or anything like that, but just like so. For instance, right here we don't need to include that. Probably don't need to include that area. So for now we're just going to go with this area here. And I'm going to hold the shift key down and add this area here. Add this guy in. And this horse. And I'm not being, you know, I don't have to be really detailed or anything, because ultimately the end result that I'm after will work fine just the way I'm doing it. And then lastly, we're going to just add in this guy, and there's only a couple areas that you can see the blue, so you can see where the blue helped us identify areas that we need to edit. Okay, so now with this new layer 2, I can just choose Edit, Fill, and it fills in the areas where the guys are solid. Alright, now the next thing that I thought would be cool would be to have a medicine wheel behind these guys, and I want to make sure that it's centered. So I'm going to left mouse click and drag over a guide and snap it down to center. I just selected the background so it'll center perfectly on the background. And for now we're going to create a crosshair, and then I'm going to choose the elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to create yet another layer, layer 3, and I'm just going to hold the shift key down and create a circle, maybe about that big, and I just want to drag it until it snaps, and you'll see why I'm doing it this way in just a moment. And yeah, I think that'll work. So the first thing I want to do is fill the circle to white. Alright, now medicine wheel, for those of you who don't know, has 4 quadrants, red, yellow, white, and black. Okay, those are the 4 sacred colors. And so what I want to do is actually fill in those 4 colors. So I'm going to lock the background layer for the circle here, and we're going to switch from the elliptical marquee tool to the rectangular marquee tool. And I need a red. So what I'm going to do is create a selection area, and notice how it nicely snaps to our guides. And I'm going to select a red, and as I mentioned before, I like CC0000 for red. So I'm going to click OK, and because I have this layer locked, whenever I choose Edit, Fill, How. It only fills in that area. So then I can scoot down the selection to the next quadrant and select yellow. And I like yellows that have a little bit of, like a little toward the orange side, something like that. So I'm going to hit edit, fill, and then it's red, yellow, white, black. So the white panel's fine as is. So I'm going to come up here and choose black, edit, fill, black. Okay, so if I hide the guides, which is Control H or Command H, you'll see that we have this medicine wheel. Now I don't actually want it to be up that high. So what I'm going to do is actually just kind of move it down a little bit like this. Okay, and then I'm going to add some text. And again, I'm going to use my favorite font, Bank Gothic. One of my favorite fonts anyways. And the type that we're going to enter in is Department of Homeland Security. Okay, this is like the first Department of Homeland Security. So I'm going to type in Department of, and it's a bit big, so double click to select it all and try maybe 84. Actually, I want Department of, I think, to be a bit smaller. Let's try 60. Yeah, that'll work. And I can turn my guide back on just to make sure that the type is centered on the guide, like so. And then select the type tool again, and we're going to type in Homeland Security. And we're going to make that one a little bit bigger. Maybe 96. Nope, too big. 84, still too big. 72. Okay, that'll work. And actually, I think I'm going to make Department of a little smaller, just so that there's some contrast there. And actually, I think I'm going to change the color of Department of to the red, so that it draws attention to the Homeland Security part. Okay, now I'm not so much committed to dimensions or anything like that. You'll notice that we're actually, I actually have some extra black space here, and we can fix that just by cropping and stuff. But before I do that, I'm going to hit save. Actually, I'm going to hit save as, because I want to save it as a Photoshop file. And we'll call this security. And then I'm going to choose the crop tool, and we're just going to kind of even out. Okay, now if I turn the blue off, this is my final design. Okay, now all that I need to do then is I'm going to select all, just like we did before, right mouse click, merge layers, and then we're going to file, save as, choose PNG, and we'll save it to the desktop. Then we'll come over here to Teespring, and I'm going to delete our robot guy for now. And we're going to upload our new and we'll just kind of okay, and so you'll notice that if we zoom in here, our graphic looks pretty darn good. We have the white outlines that help separate out the the parts of the image that need separated out. So that's pretty cool. We can zoom back out here. And our shirt cost is a little bit higher. It's $10.95. And that's because we have more colors compared to where we were before with the other design, with the robot design. But I want to show you something else that it's a little trick. It's a bit advanced. So our design tutorial, if you will, is officially over now. But for those of you who want to kind of step things up a little bit further and experiment with taking things to the next level, let me show you an advanced trick. And the reason why I want to show you this trick is because, actually, I need to unmerge these layers here and turn the blue back on. So the reason why I want to show you this trick is because it can save you money. Okay, what I've found in my experimenting is that Teespring responds better to vector images than it does high resolution raster images, which is what Photoshop produces. And most of the time that's fine. You know, it'll work fine. But in some cases, it can mean the difference of, you know, some extra money, which means the less you have to pay Teespring, the more money you're going to make. So what we're going to do is actually flatten this image. And I'm going to select all and copy it. And then we're going to come over here to Illustrator, and let's see if we can get this all in. And I'm going to paste what we just copied into Illustrator. Okay, so it's still a raster image, just like we created in Photoshop. We just copied and pasted. So what I'm going to do next is click Image Trace. And you'll notice that it just turned it to black and white. And that's okay. We want to choose, we're going to change it to 6 colors. And you can also access it from up here, the presets. And so it's reconfiguring it. And so now you notice we see our image, okay? But what we actually have, we want to limit the colors to just the colors that we're ultimately going to use, right? And so we have blue, red, yellow, white, and black. So we have 5 colors, correct? Black and white, red and yellow, and blue. So instead of 6 colors, we're going to change it to 5 and have it reprocess. And because we're processing this using Trace in Illustrator, it's turning it into a vector design, which means we could scale it to whatever size we want and it'll remain sharp. So the next thing we want to do, I'm going to close the trace here. We're going to choose Expand. And next thing I want to do is we want to, what do we want to do? I'm going to select an object here. And that's this background. And we can actually, we should be able to select this object based upon color. Let's see if I can find that here. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry, I was in the wrong. Select based on same fill color. And the reason why that's important is because I've noticed in the past, whenever I'm doing conversions in Illustrator that it'll sprinkle in tiny little, you know, tiny little hidden spots or flecks of blue or whatever because of the conversion process. But whenever you select based on fill color, you need to select an area to determine the fill color first, which is why I selected the big area. And then select based on the fill color. It'll select everything in the entire drawing that has blue in it, in this case. And then I can just hit delete, and it'll remove any blue that's in the image so that it's not there anymore. And the reason why we're doing that is because if you leave any blue in there, even just the tiniest little spot in one of the horses, Teespring will see that as another color and it'll try to reproduce it. And you don't want that. We actually want to limit our color choices to the 4 that we have here. So now we can choose File, Save As, and we're going to call this Security 1, Save, and we'll just go with the default setting, okay. And it saved it as an EPS. Okay, you want to save it as an EPS because that's the only Illustrator file that Teespring will read. It only reads JPEG, PNG, and EPS. So now, if we go over here and let's delete our current image, choose Upload Your Own, and we have Security 1 EPS. Now what's interesting is that in this case, it actually determined that the cost is about the same, $10.95. What I found is that in some cases, whenever you experiment, unless I was very precise in Photoshop, the way I showed you to create this, in picking colors. And so that's why we actually ended up at the same price in both cases. But in some instances, I found where designs created using the method I just showed you in Illustrator, I've saved as much as $1 a shirt just by using that method. The other benefit of doing it the way that I just showed you, for those of you who have Illustrator, is that with this being a vector image, everything is actually going to be a bit sharper because you're not limited by pixels. Even though the image that we created before was a high resolution vector or raster image saved as a PNG file, this version will ultimately come out sharper because it's a vector image created in Illustrator, which means it's created with outlines. But overall, it basically looks the same, as you can see. You know, it's still clean, and whatever color we would end up going with, you know, it's still going to look really good. Okay, so that is my tutorial, and I hope that you found it helpful, and I'd love to see you put all the skills that you learned in the Photoshop course to use to create some pretty cool designs. And I feel quite confident that if you create some smart looking designs and get them out there for sale, you should very easily be able to produce some extra income even over the next weekend. And so I wish you luck with that, and we'll talk again soon.